Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Jonathan Cohn, and today I'll be doing my book review of Andy Weir's science fiction novel, Artemis. This is a standalone science fiction novel from him. I have read now two of his books. I read his first book, The Martian, a couple of years ago, and I absolutely loved it. It was one of my favorite books that year. It was one of my it still is one of my favorite science fiction novels. The movie of The Martian is one of my favorite science fiction movies. So I really enjoyed it. Picked up Artemis several months ago and have been intending to read it for a while, but just haven't felt motivated yet. But I was feeling motivated to read it this month. So I picked it up and read it, and I really enjoyed it. I think it was a lot of fun. It just didn't hit the heights that the first book, The Martian, had. So let's talk about what really works for this book. What really works for this novel is the world building. Andy Weir really spends a good amount of time describing how the Artemis city works, what the different areas of the city are like, how the science behind it, and also the culture behind it, the currency and the economy, the business, like all of that stuff was endlessly fascinating. And the way that Andy Weir made it a living, breathing society in this book was really interesting. And this was I could see him taking this and turning this into a series if he had wanted to, and he could have really had some interesting world building here. But the world building was what kept me reading throughout the book, because it was just that fascinating. And I thought that Andy Weir is showing that if he were to write a big epic sci-fi series with lots of books that's more like space opera necessarily, but maybe keeping his realistic science fiction elements to it, I think that he would have a really good gem on his hands, and I hope he considers doing that, because so far he's only really written standalones, and I think he has the potential. If he wrote a series, it would be good. So I loved the world building here. Unfortunately, I only thought the plot was good, but the plot never hooked me enough. I thought that the plot was he did everything just about right, in the sense that the action sequences were good, the way that he set things up was good, the way that he paid things off was good. Everything was good, but there's just nothing. There wasn't that it factor that made me go, that's the best. That's just amazing. There just wasn't that it factor here. So it was a little bit disappointing in that regard, because the Martian had the it factor really well down. This is kind of like a heist-ish book. And I like reading heists, but it didn't have anything that really set it apart. Whereas, The Martian, being Robinson Crusoe in space, or Castaway in space, really just had the it factor there. So the plot wasn't necessarily my favorite, and I also didn't love the character of Jasmine Bashara, or also known as Jazz Bashara. I thought that she was really entertaining. I thought she was funny, and that is one thing I will say is he makes me laugh in his books. Andy Weir does, laugh out loud, laugh, actually audibly. Many authors can't do that. And so it's very rare when I get a gem like this to be able to laugh. But despite the fact that the main character makes me laugh, I didn't connect with her. I think that there's a couple of reasons for this. One, because the worldviews of the character and the outlook of the character are so different from what I want my protagonists to have. I want them to be optimistic about the future. I want them to have good morals, whereas she really kind of does, but kind of doesn't. She's more roguish in her personality. She's also much more not supportive of religion and things like that, and so I was having a hard time connecting with her anyway. I think there's a secondary factor that she didn't necessarily feel like your standard female character. I liked the way that he writes male characters is, I think, because Mark Watney worked. His voice sounded like a general man would in that situation. I feel like Jasmine is more of his perception of how a woman should sound, maybe, but it just didn't necessarily work entirely on that scale. But the bigger issue for me was the outlook of the character didn't work. So when the character is just okay and the plot is good, but the world building is amazing, you get an overall mixed, like an overall pretty good side of the book, but it's not. It just fails to reach the utter heights that the book could have had. And that's a real shame because it's entertaining. I flew through this book in one day. I sat down in the morning and I thought I'm going to read 150 pages today and 150 pages tomorrow. And then I decided my family was going to go watch a movie that I wasn't going to watch and a few others weren't going to watch. So I was like, if I'm not going to be watching the movie, I'm just going to blaze through the book while they watch the movie. So I was able to read the rest of the book. And so I blazed through it in a day, and it was a lot of fun to read in that day, but it just, I don't think it's going to hold with me in the same way that The Martian did. I think The Martian also has the added aspect that it has the movie, so I felt so much more connected to the book when I read it because I loved the movie so much, whereas this doesn't have that. If this got a movie adaptation, maybe I would enjoy it more. I'm not sure. There are some minor characters that I think were pretty entertaining. One, Noguchi, the head of the Artemis station, I thought she was great. I thought she had great chutzpah. I thought she had great drive and great leadership skills that I thought was interesting. I also really liked the character of Svoboda. That's a very hard word to say. Svoboda was this character that he was awkward. You could tell he kind of liked Jasmine, but he was like having a hard time showing it, and he was also just naturally funny. He had some great hilarious lines. So those characters maybe I'll remember, but most of the characters I don't think I'm going to remember long term from this book. And getting to my final gripe about the book, and this isn't necessarily something that really hurts it in my rating necessarily, but it's just a problem that I have with this book and with the other Andy Weir book that I read, which is that he has so much bad language in his books, so much foul language. It's the same problem with Game of Thrones that I have. It's the same problem that I have with other fantasy sci-fi series. It's that the language is just out of control here. And I understand sometimes people talk differently than I do, but it's just crazy here. And if he toned down the language significantly, I would feel better about the book. I wouldn't necessarily give it a better rating, but I'd feel better about it. But it's just hard to root for the characters when they're so foul-mouthed, and it's so hard to root for the characters when they don't have those positive traits that I like in them. So overall, this is an entertaining book that was a fun read, and I'm glad I read it. And it was a thrill ride of a heist type book. It just didn't work as well as it should have. So I give it like an 8.2 out of 10. Like really entertaining work, but it just didn't reach the upper echelons for me. So if you've read this book, did you enjoy it? Did you have the same problems I had? Did you have different problems? And what really worked for you? Was it the world building, or did you really like the characters? Let me know all those thoughts in the comments section down below. But until next time, I'm Jonathan, and thank you for watching.